In the sprawling outskirts of Buenos Aires, where concrete meets dreams and poverty breeds legends, a story began that would captivate the world for decades to come. The year was 1960, and in the humble neighborhood of Villa Fiorito, a child was born who would redefine what it meant to touch a football. This is not just the story of a player, but the tale of a phenomenon that transcended sport itself. Diego Armando Maradona entered this world on October 30th, 1960, as the fifth child of Diego Maradona Sr. and Dalma Salvadora Franco. His father, known as Don Diego, worked tirelessly in a bone meal factory, his hands permanently stained from years of manual labor. His mother, Tota as she was affectionately called, managed their modest household with 8 children, stretching every peso to ensure her family survived another day. The Maradona home was a small, cramped dwelling with corrugated metal sheets for walls and a dirt floor that turned to mud when the rains came. Welcome to Icons of History, where we explore the extraordinary lives of figures who shaped our world. I'm your host, and today we delve into the remarkable journey of Diego Maradona, a man whose life embodied both the beautiful and the tragic sides of human nature. If you're passionate about discovering the untold stories behind history's most fascinating personalities, please subscribe to our channel and join our community of history enthusiasts. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these compelling narratives to life. Villa Fiorito was not a place where dreams typically came true. It was a settlement born from necessity, where families migrated from Argentina's rural provinces seeking opportunities in the capital. The streets were unpaved, electricity was sporadic, and running water was a luxury few could afford. Children here learned early that life was a struggle, that every opportunity had to be seized with both hands. Yet it was precisely in this environment of hardship that young Diego's extraordinary relationship with football began to flourish. From the moment he could walk, Diego was drawn to anything round that could be kicked. His first football was not the pristine leather sphere of professional stadiums, but a makeshift ball crafted from rags and tape, created by his father's loving hands. Don Diego, despite working exhausting 12-hour shifts, would return home and spend precious moments teaching his son the fundamentals of the game that consumed Argentina's soul. These evening sessions in their tiny backyard became sacred rituals, father and son connected by their shared passion for the beautiful game. The streets of Villa Fiorito served as Diego's first stadium. Every corner, every alleyway became a potential football pitch, where neighborhood children gathered to play until darkness forced them home. Here, among the dust and debris, Diego began to display skills that defied explanation. While other children his age struggled to control a ball, Diego seemed to communicate with it telepathically. The ball appeared magnetized to his feet, responding to his every thought and desire with supernatural precision. Local residents would stop their daily routines to watch this small boy weave magic with his feet. Doña Carmen, the neighborhood's unofficial chronicler, would later recall how Diego could juggle a ball for hours without it touching the ground. His concentration so intense that the chaos of Villa Fiorito seemed to fade into silence around him. Shopkeepers would emerge from their stores, construction workers would pause their labor, and mothers would delay their errands just to witness the daily spectacle of Diego's street performances. By age 8, Diego's reputation had spread beyond the confines of Villa Fiorito. Francis Cornejo, a talent scout for Argentinos Juniors, had heard whispers about a remarkable child in the southern suburbs. When he finally made the journey to see Diego play, he found a boy so small he barely reached the waists of his opponents, yet so skilled that he dominated every match with an artistry that left spectators speechless. Cornejo knew immediately that he was witnessing something extraordinary, a talent that emerged perhaps once in a generation. The invitation to join Los Cebollitas, the youth team of Argentinos Juniors, represented more than just an opportunity for Diego. It was a lifeline for the entire Maradona family. The modest stipend provided by the club helped alleviate some of their financial pressures, but more importantly, it offered Diego a structured environment where his gifts could be properly nurtured. Every morning, he would make the long journey from Villa Fiorito to the club's training facilities, carrying with him not just his own dreams, but the hopes of an entire community that saw in him their chance for redemption. Training sessions at Los Cebollitas revealed the full extent of Diego's extraordinary abilities. Coach Francis Gregorio, a man who had worked with countless young players, had never encountered anyone like Diego. The boy possessed an intuitive understanding of the game that couldn't be taught, a spatial awareness that allowed him to anticipate movements before they happened, and a technical ability that made the impossible seem routine. His teammates, initially skeptical of this tiny newcomer from the slums, quickly became believers as they witnessed Diego's daily exhibitions of footballing genius. The transformation in Diego's life was remarkable, yet he never forgot his roots. Every evening, he would return to Villa Fiorito and share his experiences with the neighborhood children who gathered around him like disciples. He would demonstrate the techniques he had learned, recreate the goals he had scored, and inspire others to believe that they too could transcend their circumstances through dedication and skill. Diego became not just a player, but a symbol of hope for an entire community that had been forgotten by the rest of society. As Diego's reputation grew within the youth leagues, so did the expectations placed upon his young shoulders. Scouts from major clubs began making regular pilgrimages to watch Los Cebollitas play, but they came specifically to see one player. Diego's performances were becoming legendary, his goals more spectacular, his assists more creative. Yet despite the growing attention, he remained grounded by the values instilled by his parents and the harsh realities of his upbringing in Villa Fiorito. The chapter of Diego's humble beginnings reveals not just the birth of a football legend, but the forging of a character that would captivate and confound the world for decades to come. In the dusty streets of Villa Fiorito, among the struggles and dreams of Argentina's forgotten people, a boy learned to transform a simple game into pure art, setting the stage for a journey that would take him to the very pinnacle of human achievement and the depths of personal struggle. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds of Argentinos Juniors as 15-year-old Diego Armando Maradona laced up his boots for what would become a historic day in football. October 20th, 1976, marked not just another match in the Argentine Primera División, but the moment when a boy from Villa Fiorito would announce his arrival on the professional stage with a performance that defied every expectation and shattered every preconception about what a teenager could accomplish in the world's most demanding football league. The journey from the dusty streets of his neighborhood to the pristine grass of professional stadiums had been neither swift nor simple. For 3 years, Diego had dominated youth football with Los Cebollitas, accumulating an almost mythical record of 136 consecutive victories. His teammates had grown accustomed to his magic, but the adult world of professional football remained skeptical. How could this diminutive figure, barely 5 feet tall and weighing less than most children his age, possibly compete against seasoned professionals who had spent years honing their craft? Juan Carlos Montes, the coach of Argentinos Juniors' first team, had watched Diego's progression through the youth ranks with a mixture of admiration and concern. The boy's talent was undeniable, but professional football was a brutal arena where physical strength often trumped technical ability. Montes had seen countless promising youngsters crumble under the pressure of senior football, their dreams shattered by the harsh realities of a game that showed no mercy to the unprepared. Yet something about Diego suggested he was different, that beneath his youthful exterior lay the heart of a warrior. The decision to promote Diego to the first team had not been unanimous. Club directors questioned the wisdom of thrusting such a young player into the spotlight, fearing that premature exposure could damage both his development and the club's reputation. However, financial pressures and Diego's increasingly spectacular performances in youth matches forced their hand. Argentinos Juniors was not a wealthy club, and they desperately needed something special to attract fans and generate revenue. Diego represented their greatest hope for achieving both objectives. Training sessions with the senior squad revealed the enormous gulf between youth and professional football. Diego found himself surrounded by men who had spent years perfecting their craft, players whose bodies bore the scars of countless battles on pitches across Argentina. Initially, some veterans viewed this teenager with skepticism, questioning whether he possessed the mental fortitude to withstand the physical and psychological pressures of professional competition. Their doubts began to evaporate as they witnessed Diego's extraordinary ability to adapt and excel under increasingly difficult circumstances. The technical staff marveled at Diego's capacity to absorb tactical instructions and implement them with precision that belied his age. While other young players struggled to understand complex positional play, Diego demonstrated an intuitive grasp of football's strategic elements that suggested years of experience he had never actually accumulated. His vision allowed him to see passing opportunities that escaped even seasoned professionals, while his ball control enabled him to execute maneuvers that seemed to violate the laws of physics. As news of Diego's promotion spread throughout Buenos Aires, anticipation reached fever pitch. Football journalists, initially dismissive of what they considered a publicity stunt, began paying serious attention to reports emerging from Argentinos Juniors' training ground. Stories circulated about this teenage phenomenon who could nutmeg experienced defenders with casual ease, who could score goals from impossible angles, and who approached every training session with the intensity of a cup final. The pressure surrounding Diego's professional debut was immense. Expectations from his family, his community in Villa Fiorito, and the football-obsessed nation of Argentina weighed heavily on his young shoulders. His parents, Don Diego and Tota, had sacrificed enormously to support their son's dreams, often going without basic necessities to ensure he could continue playing. The entire neighborhood had invested their hopes in this boy, who represented their chance to prove that greatness could emerge from the most humble circumstances. On that fateful October morning, as Diego prepared for his debut against Talleres de Córdoba, he carried with him not just his own ambitions, but the dreams of countless people who saw in him their opportunity for vicarious glory. The dressing room atmosphere was electric with nervous energy as teammates offered encouragement and advice to their youngest colleague. Veteran players who had initially questioned his readiness now found themselves inspired by his calm confidence and unwavering determination. The moment Diego stepped onto the pitch at Estadio Diego Armando Maradona, the crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of spectators had come specifically to witness this historic debut, their cheers creating a wall of sound that seemed to lift the young player above the ground. As he touched the ball for the first time in professional football, a hush fell over the stadium. Every eye focused on this diminutive figure who had captured the imagination of an entire nation. What followed was a performance that exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. Diego's first touch was perfect, his first pass precise, his first dribble mesmerizing. Within minutes, it became clear that this was no ordinary debut, but the emergence of a talent that would redefine football's possibilities. His movement was fluid and unpredictable. His decision-making mature beyond his years, his technical execution flawless under pressure that would have overwhelmed players twice his age. The transformation from promising youth to professional footballer was complete, but this was merely the beginning of a journey that would take Diego Maradona to heights previously unimaginable. His debut marked not just a personal milestone, but a moment when football itself began to evolve, shaped by the vision and artistry of a boy who had learned to dream on the streets of Villa Fiorito and was now ready to share those dreams with the world. The thunderous roar of 80,000 voices echoed through the Estadio Azteca as Diego Armando Maradona stepped onto the pristine green turf of Mexico City. June 22, 1986 would forever be etched in football history as the day when a 25-year-old Argentine transformed from a talented player into an immortal legend. The quarterfinal match against England carried far more weight than a simple football game. It was a collision of nations still scarred by the recent Falklands War, a battle where sporting glory would serve as a proxy for national pride and redemption. The path to this defining moment had been paved with both triumph and controversy. After his remarkable debut with Argentinos Juniors, Diego's reputation had spread like wildfire throughout South America and beyond. His transfer to Boca Juniors in 1981 had been a homecoming of sorts, allowing him to play for the club he had supported since childhood, while remaining close to his beloved Villa Fiorito. The passionate fans of La Bombonera embraced their new hero with an intensity that bordered on religious devotion, creating an atmosphere where Diego's artistry could flourish under the protective embrace of unconditional love. European scouts had been circling like vultures, recognizing that Diego represented a once-in-a-generation talent that could transform any team fortunate enough to secure his services. When Barcelona finally succeeded in acquiring his signature for a then world record fee of $7 million, it marked the beginning of Diego's complex relationship with European football. The Camp Nou faithful expected miracles from their expensive acquisition, and initially, Diego delivered performances that justified every peso of his transfer fee. However, Barcelona proved to be a crucible that tested Diego's character in ways he had never experienced. The pressure of performing in one of the world's most demanding leagues, combined with the suffocating attention of the Spanish media, began to take its toll on the young Argentine. Injuries plagued his time in Catalonia, most notably a brutal tackle by Athletic Bilbao's Andoni Goicoechea that left Diego with a severely damaged ankle and a burning desire for revenge that would manifest itself in increasingly aggressive on-field behavior. The infamous brawl during the 1984 Copa del Rey final against Athletic Bilbao revealed a darker side of Diego's personality that had been simmering beneath his artistic exterior. As tensions escalated throughout the match, Diego's frustration boiled over into a mass confrontation that saw him wielding his boot like a weapon against opponents and officials alike. The images of Argentina's golden boy engaged in such unseemly violence shocked the football world and provided the first glimpse of the demons that would later consume him. Despite these controversies, Diego's performances for the Argentine national team continued to captivate audiences worldwide. The 1982 World Cup in Spain had ended in disappointment, with Diego's inexperience and the team's tactical limitations preventing them from achieving their ultimate goal. However, those setbacks only fueled his determination to prove that he belonged among football's elite, that his talent could elevate not just himself, but an entire nation to unprecedented heights. The move to Napoli in 1984 represented a fresh start for Diego, an opportunity to escape the suffocating atmosphere of Barcelona and embrace a new challenge in Italy's notoriously defensive Serie A. The passionate Neapolitan supporters welcomed their new savior with an enthusiasm that reminded Diego of his early days at Boca Juniors, creating an emotional connection that would sustain him through the trials ahead. Under the guidance of coach Ottavio Bianchi, Diego began to rediscover the joy that had initially drawn him to football, his performances reaching new levels of creativity and effectiveness. As the 1986 World Cup approached, Diego had evolved from a promising youngster into the undisputed leader of the Argentine national team. Coach Carlos Bilardo had built the entire tactical system around Diego's unique abilities, creating a framework that maximized his strengths while compensating for his occasional defensive lapses. The pressure on Diego's shoulders was immense. Argentina's football-obsessed population expected nothing less than World Cup glory, and they looked to their captain to deliver the ultimate prize. The early matches of the tournament showcased Diego's growing maturity as both a player and a leader. His performances against South Korea and Bulgaria demonstrated his ability to control games through sheer force of will, dictating tempo and creating opportunities for teammates who had learned to anticipate his every movement. However, it was the quarterfinal against England that would define not just the tournament, but Diego's entire legacy. The political undertones of the match were impossible to ignore. The Falklands War had ended just 4 years earlier, leaving deep wounds in the Argentine psyche that football could either heal or reopen. Diego understood the symbolic importance of this encounter, recognizing that victory would represent more than sporting success. It would be a form of national catharsis that could help his countrymen reclaim their pride and dignity. What transpired over the next 90 minutes transcended sport and entered the realm of mythology. Diego's first goal, scored with his hand while the referee remained oblivious to the infraction, became known as the Hand of God, a moment of cunning that Diego later described as divine intervention. The controversy surrounding this goal would follow him for the rest of his career, but in that moment, it represented the kind of street-smart intelligence that had enabled him to survive and thrive in the harsh environment of Villa Fiorito. 4 minutes later, Diego produced what many consider the greatest individual goal in World Cup history. Collecting the ball in his own half, he embarked on a mesmerizing 60-yard journey that saw him glide past 5 English defenders with the grace of a dancer and the determination of a warrior. The goal was pure artistry, a moment when football transcended its physical limitations and became something approaching poetry in motion. The final whistle confirmed Argentina's 2-1 victory, but more importantly, it announced Diego Maradona's arrival as football's undisputed king. The boy from Villa Fiorito had conquered the world's biggest stage, transforming himself from a talented player into a global icon whose influence would extend far beyond the boundaries of sport. The streets of Naples erupted in celebration as news spread that their beloved Diego had led Argentina to World Cup glory. Church bells rang throughout the ancient city, fireworks illuminated the Mediterranean sky, and thousands of Neapolitans poured into the streets chanting, "Diego! Diego!" as if summoning a deity. For the people of southern Italy's most passionate city, Maradona's triumph in Mexico represented more than sporting achievement. It was validation that their adopted son could conquer the world while wearing their colors. Returning to Napoli after his World Cup heroics, Diego found himself elevated to a status that transcended football. The city that had welcomed him 2 years earlier as a talented but troubled player now embraced him as their messiah, the man who would deliver them from decades of sporting mediocrity and social marginalization. Naples had always been Italy's forgotten city, dismissed by the wealthy North as backward and irrelevant, but Diego's presence offered them hope that they too could claim their place among Europe's elite. The 1986-87 season marked the beginning of Diego's golden period at Napoli, a time when his individual brilliance merged seamlessly with collective ambition to create something magical. Under the tactical guidance of Ottavio Bianchi, the team had been carefully constructed around Diego's unique abilities, with every player understanding their role in maximizing their captain's extraordinary talents. Brazilian midfielder Alamo provided the perfect complement to Diego's creativity, while striker Carica offered the clinical finishing that transformed Diego's assists into goals. Diego's performances during this period reached levels that seemed to defy the laws of physics and logic. His ball control was so precise that opponents often appeared hypnotized, unable to predict which direction he would move or when he would release the ball. His vision allowed him to see passing opportunities that remained invisible to everyone else on the pitch, while his left foot possessed the magical ability to bend the ball around defenders and into spaces that seemed impossibly small. The transformation of Napoli from Serie A strugglers to title contenders was nothing short of miraculous. Diego's arrival had coincided with significant investment in the squad, but it was his leadership and inspiration that truly elevated the team's performance. In training sessions, he demanded the same level of perfection from his teammates that he imposed upon himself, pushing them to heights they had never imagined possible. His work ethic was legendary. Despite his reputation for off-field indulgences, Diego approached every training session with the intensity of a cup final. The 1986-87 season culminated in Napoli's first-ever Serie A title, a triumph that sent the entire city into delirium. The final match against Fiorentina became a coronation ceremony, with Diego scoring the decisive goal that secured the championship in front of a delirious home crowd. As the final whistle blew, grown men wept openly in the stands, overcome by the realization that their impossible dream had finally become reality. Diego was carried off the field on the shoulders of his teammates, his face beaming with the satisfaction of a promise fulfilled. The celebration that followed lasted for days, with hundreds of thousands of Neapolitans taking to the streets to honor their hero. Diego's image appeared on murals throughout the city, his name was chanted in churches, and newborn children were christened Diego in his honor. The economic impact of Napoli's success was immediate and profound, with tourism increasing dramatically as football fans from around the world flocked to witness the magic of Maradona in person. Diego's individual performances during this golden period were nothing short of spectacular. His goal against Juventus in Turin, where he dribbled past 4 defenders before slotting the ball into the bottom corner, became an instant classic that was replayed endlessly on television screens across Italy. His free kick against AC Milan struck with such power and precision that goalkeeper Giovanni Galli could only watch helplessly as the ball nestled in the top corner, demonstrated the full range of his technical abilities. The 1989 UEFA Cup triumph represented the pinnacle of Diego's club career, as Napoli defeated Stuttgart in a thrilling final that showcased everything beautiful about the game. Diego's performance in the second leg was masterful, his every touch drawing gasps of admiration from the San Paolo crowd. When Caracas scored the winning goal from Diego's perfectly weighted pass, the stadium erupted in scenes of pure ecstasy that captured the essence of football's emotional power. During this period, Diego's influence extended far beyond the football pitch. He became a cultural icon whose impact on Neapolitan society was profound and lasting. His presence elevated the city's international profile, attracting investment and attention that had previously been directed exclusively toward Italy's northern regions. Local businesses flourished as Diego's popularity drew tourists and media attention to Naples, creating economic opportunities that had been unimaginable before his arrival. The relationship between Diego and the Neapolitan people was unlike anything seen in modern football. He was not merely their star player, but their representative, the man who carried their hopes and dreams onto the biggest stages in world football. When he scored goals, the entire city celebrated. When he was fouled, they felt the pain personally. This emotional connection created an atmosphere at the San Paolo Stadium that was both intimidating for opponents and inspiring for Diego himself. Diego's second Serie A title with Napoli in 1990 was achieved against a backdrop of increasing personal turmoil, but his on-field performances remained consistently brilliant. His ability to compartmentalize his problems and focus entirely on football during matches was remarkable, demonstrating a mental strength that complemented his obvious physical gifts. Even as controversies swirled around his private life, Diego continued to produce moments of magic that reminded everyone why he was considered the greatest player of his generation. The peak of Diego's career was characterized not just by individual brilliance, but by his ability to elevate everyone around him. His teammates spoke of feeling invincible when playing alongside him, confident that his creativity and leadership would find solutions to any problem they encountered. Opponents, meanwhile, often appeared defeated before matches even began, overwhelmed by the prospect of facing a player whose reputation had assumed mythical proportions. As the 1990 World Cup in Italy approached, Diego stood at the absolute summit of world football, a player whose achievements had already secured his place among the game's immortals. However, the tournament would also mark the beginning of his dramatic fall from grace, as the pressures and temptations that had been building throughout his career finally began to overwhelm even his extraordinary resilience and talent. The weight of the world pressed down upon Diego's shoulders as he stepped onto the familiar turf of the San Paolo Stadium for what would become one of the most emotionally charged matches in World Cup history. July 3rd, 1990, the semifinal between Argentina and Italy transformed Diego from beloved adopted son into public enemy number one in the eyes of 60 million Italians. The man who had brought unprecedented glory to Naples now found himself asking the very people who had worshipped him to choose between their country and their hero. The psychological warfare began days before the match when Diego made comments that would haunt him for years to come. Speaking to the media, he questioned the loyalty of Neapolitan fans, asking them to remember that for 364 days of the year, the rest of Italy treated them as second-class citizens. Yet now they were expected to support the national team. His words, born from genuine affection for his adopted city and frustration with Italy's north-south divide, were interpreted as betrayal by a nation that had embraced him as one of their own. The match itself became a microcosm of Diego's entire career. Brilliant individual performance overshadowed by controversy and heartbreak. His penalty in the shootout, struck with the same left foot that had brought so much joy to Naples, sent Argentina to the final and broke Italian hearts across the peninsula. The image of Diego celebrating while Neapolitan fans wept in the stands captured the impossible position he had placed himself in, torn between personal ambition and the love of people who had given him everything. The 1990 World Cup final against West Germany marked the beginning of Diego's descent from the pinnacle of world football. The match was a brutal, cynical affair that bore little resemblance to the beautiful game Diego had spent his career elevating. Targeted by German defenders who seemed more interested in stopping him through any means necessary than playing football, Diego found himself isolated and frustrated as Argentina lost 1-0 to a penalty that many considered harsh and undeserved. The tears that flowed down Diego's face as he received his runner-up medal were not just for a lost final, but for the realization that his body and mind were beginning to betray him. The accumulated stress of carrying Argentina's expectations, combined with the physical toll of years of brutal treatment from opponents, had left him vulnerable to the demons that had been lurking in the shadows of his success. Returning to Naples after the World Cup, Diego found a city divided in its feelings toward him. While many fans forgave his comments and celebrated his loyalty to their colors, others felt betrayed by his apparent lack of respect for Italian hospitality. The magical atmosphere that had once made the San Paolo Stadium an impregnable fortress began to dissipate, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that affected Diego's performances and emotional well-being. The cocaine scandal that erupted in March 1991 shattered the illusion that Diego was invincible. The positive drug test that led to his 15-month suspension from football revealed the extent to which he had been struggling with addiction, using substances to cope with pressures that had become unbearable. The boy who had once found solace only in football now sought escape from the very game that had made him famous, turning to chemicals that promised temporary relief but delivered only deeper despair. The media circus that surrounded Diego's fall from grace was merciless and unforgiving. Newspapers that had once celebrated his every touch now dissected his every mistake. Photographers stalked his movements, and former allies distanced themselves from a man who had become a liability rather than an asset. The contrast between his treatment during his peak years and his persecution during his darkest moments revealed the fickle nature of fame and the brutal reality that heroes are often discarded as quickly as they are created. Diego's attempts at redemption were sporadic and ultimately unsuccessful. Brief returns to football with Sevilla and Newell's Old Boys showed flashes of his former brilliance, but the magic that had once seemed effortless now required enormous effort to summon. His body, ravaged by years of abuse both on and off the field, could no longer respond to the demands his mind placed upon it. The 1994 World Cup in the United States offered Diego one final chance at glory, an opportunity to end his international career on a high note and remind the world of his extraordinary gifts. His performances in the early matches suggested that the old magic remained, his goal celebration against Greece capturing the manic energy that had always defined his approach to life. However, the positive test for ephedrine that ended his tournament prematurely also marked the end of his career as an elite footballer. The years that followed were marked by a series of personal struggles that played out in the unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. Weight gain, health scares, and erratic behavior became the dominant narratives surrounding a man who had once been the most celebrated athlete on the planet. His attempts to find meaning and purpose outside of football were largely unsuccessful, as coaching stints and media appearances failed to provide the satisfaction and identity that playing had once given him. Yet, even in his darkest moments, Diego retained the love and loyalty of millions of fans who remembered not his failures, but his triumphs. In Argentina, he remained a figure of almost religious significance, a man whose achievements transcended sport and touched something fundamental about national identity and pride. The murals that adorned buildings throughout Buenos Aires depicted him not as a fallen idol, but as an eternal symbol of what was possible when talent, determination, and passion combined in perfect harmony. The news of Diego's death on November 25, 2020, sent shockwaves around the world that transcended football and touched every corner of human society. The outpouring of grief was immediate and overwhelming, as heads of state, fellow athletes, and ordinary fans struggled to comprehend a world without the man who had redefined what it meant to be extraordinary. In Argentina, 3 days of national mourning were declared, while in Naples, the São Paulo Stadium was renamed in his honor. Diego Armando Maradona's legacy extends far beyond the statistics and trophies that marked his career. He represented the triumph of the human spirit over adversity, the possibility that greatness could emerge from the most humble circumstances, and the beautiful complexity of a life lived without compromise or apology. His story serves as both inspiration and cautionary tale, reminding us that even our greatest heroes are fundamentally human, capable of both transcendent achievement and devastating failure. In the end, Diego's life was a reflection of football itself, beautiful and ugly, inspiring and heartbreaking, capable of lifting the human spirit to unprecedented heights, while simultaneously revealing our deepest flaws and vulnerabilities. He remains, and will forever remain, the embodiment of everything we love and fear about the beautiful game, a man whose legend grows stronger with each passing year, and whose influence on football and society continues to resonate across generations. What do you think about Diego Maradona's complex legacy? How do you balance his extraordinary achievements with his personal struggles? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on one of history's most fascinating and controversial figures. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the life of Diego Armando Maradona. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the story of football's most enigmatic icon, please subscribe to Icons of History for more compelling narratives about the figures who shaped our world.